Harrison's heart stopped when he saw the cross on his bed, its cold silver glinting like a blade in the dim light of his Brooklyn apartment. The safe in his closet, where he'd hidden his truth, books on queer love, dog-eared pages of hope, was ajar, its lock shattered. His mother's silent condemnation screamed louder than any word she'd ever spoken. At 23, Harrison Tate had built a fortress around his identity, a delicate balance of half-truths and careful omissions to survive in a family that saw love as a sin unless it fit their rigid mold. Growing up in a small, conservative town in upstate New York, he'd learned early to hide the parts of himself that didn't align with his mother's fervent prayers or his father's stern silences. But here, in the pulsing heart of Brooklyn, he thought he'd found freedom until now. The cross wasn't just a symbol, it was a warning, a relic of his mother's unyielding faith, left to curse the life he was trying to build. He sank onto the edge of his bed, the weight of her intrusion crushing the air from his lungs. His phone buzzed, a text from Theo lighting up the screen. "Meet me in Central Park? Miss you." Harrison's fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between the warmth of Theo's words and the icy dread creeping through him. He'd met Theo and Gwen 6 months ago at a Greenwich Village bookstore, their hands brushing over a copy of Giovanni's Room. Theo, with his easy smile and sharp wit, had been a revelation, a Vietnamese-American artist who wore his queerness like a badge of honor, unapologetic and free. Their first date, a late-night coffee run, turned into hours of talking about dreams, fears, and the stories they'd both hidden from the world. Theo was the first person who made Harrison feel seen, not as a secret to be buried, but as a man worthy of love. But Harrison's mother, Eleanor, was a shadow he couldn't outrun. She'd shown up unannounced that morning, her visit cloaked in concern but laced with suspicion. "I just want to make sure you're okay, Harry," she'd said, her eyes scanning his apartment like a detective. He'd left her alone for an hour to grab groceries, never imagining she'd pry open his safe. The books inside, Call Me By Your Name, The Song of Achilles, a worn journal where he'd poured out his longing, were his sanctuary. Now, they were exposed, and her cross was a verdict. "You are wrong." Harrison shoved the cross under his pillow, his hands trembling. He couldn't stay here, not with her judgment lingering in the air. Grabbing his jacket, he headed for Central Park, Theo's text a lifeline pulling him towards something real. The city buzzed around him, taxis honking, street vendors calling, but all he could hear was the echo of his mother's voice from years ago. God doesn't make mistakes, but you can choose to sin. In a park, Theo was waiting by their favorite oak tree, its branches heavy with autumn leaves. His blonde hair caught the fading sunlight, and when he saw Harrison, his face lit up. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Theo said, pulling him into a hug. Harrison melted into the embrace, the warmth of Theo's arms a stark contrast to the cold metal of the cross still burning in his mind. "I think my mom knows," Harrison whispered, his voice breaking. Theo's grip tightened, his eyes searching Harrison's face. "Knows what?" he asked, though the weight in Harrison's tone told him enough. "Everything. She broke into my safe. She left a cross." Harrison's voice cracked, and he looked away, shame and fear tangling in his chest. Theo didn't flinch. He took Harrison's hand, leading him to a bench where the city's noise felt distant. "She can't take this from you," Theo said firmly. "Not us. Not who you are." But Harrison wasn't so sure. His mother's disapproval wasn't just a personal wound. It was a reminder of the world he'd tried to escape, a world where love like his was a battleground. As they sat together, Theo's hand in his, Harrison felt the pull of two lives, the one he wanted with Theo, and the one his mother demanded he live. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the park. Harrison's mind raced. He'd spent years hiding, but Theo had shown him what it meant to live openly, to love without fear. Yet the cross on his bed was a tether to his past, a reminder that freedom came at a cost. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Theo leaned closer, his breath warm against Harrison's cheek. "You fight for yourself. For us. Whatever it takes." Harrison nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. His mother's reach was long, her faith a weapon. As they walked hand in hand through the park, the wake of her judgment followed him, a storm brewing on the horizon. Back in his apartment, Harrison couldn't shake the image of the cross. It was still under his pillow, a silent accusation he hadn't dared to touch again. He sat at his desk, staring at the journal he'd retrieved from the safe, its pages filled with late-night confessions, his fears of never being enough, his dreams of a life where he could love Theo without apology. The journal had been his refuge since high school, when he'd first realized his feelings for a classmate named Ryan. Ryan had been the star of the soccer team, all easy charm and reckless confidence. Harrison had loved him from afar, scribbling his longing in coded words, terrified of being found out. That fear had followed him to college, where he dated women to keep up appearances, each relationship a lie that chipped away at his soul. Now, with Theo, he'd begun to believe he could be whole. But his mother's intrusion had cracked that fragile hope. Eleanor Tate was a woman of conviction, her faith a shield and a sword. Harrison remembered the Sunday sermons she dragged him to, the pastor's voice thundering about unnatural desires. She'd always watched him closely after those services, as if she could see the truth he was hiding. His phone rang, snapping him back to the present. It was his mother. He let go to voicemail, her voice spilling through the speaker. "Harrison, we need to talk. I'm worried about you. Call me back." Her tone was soft, almost pleading, but he knew better. She'd always been skilled at masking her judgment with concern. He texted Theo instead. "Can I come over? Need to get out of here." Theo's reply was instant. "Always." Doors open. Theo's apartment in Williamsburg was a stark contrast to Harrison's sparse space. Canvases lined the walls, bursts of color and abstract shapes that told stories of joy and struggle. Theo was painting when Harrison arrived, his hands streaked with blue and gold. "You okay?" Theo asked, setting down his brush. Harrison shook his head, collapsing onto the couch. "She's not going to let this go. She'll keep pushing until I'm back in that box she built for me." Theo sat beside him, his presence steadying. "Tell me about her. What's she like?" Harrison exhaled, the memories flooding back. "She's intense. Loves me in her own way, but it's conditional. Always has been. When I was a kid, she'd cry if I didn't pray right. Said she was saving my soul." He laughed bitterly. "Now she's saving me from myself." Theo listened, his eyes soft but resolute. "You don't owe her your truth. You don't have to live her version of your life. But what if she's right?" Harrison's voice was small, the question slipping out before he could stop it. What if I'm wrong? Theo's jaw tightened. He took Harrison's face in his hands, forcing him to meet his gaze. You're not wrong. You're beautiful, and you're mine, and no one gets to tell you that's a sin. The words hit Harrison like a lifeline, pulling him from the edge of despair. He kissed Theo, a desperate, searching kiss that tasted of fear and hope. For a moment, the world was just them, two men carving out a space where love didn't have to justify itself. But the moment was fleeting. Harrison's phone buzzed again. Another call from his mother. He ignored it, but the weight of her presence lingered. Theo sensed it, pulling back to study him. You can't keep running from her, he said gently. You're going to have to face this. Harrison knew he was right, but the thought of confronting his mother terrified him. She wasn't just a person. She was a symbol of everything he'd been taught to fear about himself. Yet, as he looked at Theo, at the man who'd shown him what love could be, he felt a spark of courage. I'll try, he said finally. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want you. Theo smiled, pulling him close. They spent the night talking, laughing, and losing themselves in each other. A temporary escape from the storm waiting outside. But Harrison knew the cross on his bed wasn't just a warning. It was a call to battle, when he wasn't sure he was ready to fight. The next morning, Harrison woke in Theo's bed, the soft light filtering through the curtains. Theo was still asleep, his chest rising and falling, a quiet reminder of the peace Harrison craved. But his phone, sitting on the nightstand, was a ticking bomb, 5 missed calls from his mother and a text. I'm coming back to your place at noon. We need to talk. Panic surged through him. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Theo, and dressed quickly. He had to get home before she did, to hide the evidence of his life, the books, the journal, the love he wasn't ready to defend. Back in his apartment, the cross was still under his pillow, its presence a taunt. He stuffed it into a drawer, then gathered the books from the safe, his hands shaking as he shoved them into a backpack. He'd take them to Theo's. Will they be safe? But as he zipped the bag, the doorbell rang. His heart sank. She was early. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her face a mask of calm that didn't reach her eyes. She wore a crisp white blouse and a cross necklace, her dark hair pulled back tightly. Harrison, she said, stepping inside without invitation. Why didn't you call me back? I was busy, he lied, his voice tight. He clutched the backpack, praying she wouldn't notice. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to him. We need to talk about what I found. Her tone was measured, but there was steel beneath it. Those books, they're not you. You're confused. Harry, I can help you. Harrison's stomach churned. You broke into my safe, he said, the words sharper than he'd intended. That's not helping. That's violating my privacy. Eleanor's face hardened. I'm your mother. It's my job to protect you, even from yourself. She reached into her purse, pulling out a pamphlet for a conversion therapy program. I found a place. They can help you find your way back. The room spun. Harrison had heard of those places, stories of shame, coercion, and broken spirits. He stepped back, gripping the backpack tighter. I'm not going to that, he said, his voice shaking but firm. I'm not broken. You're my son, she said, her voice rising. I won't let you throw your life away on this sin. The word cut deep, reopening wounds he'd thought he'd healed. He wanted to scream, to tell her about Theo, about the love that made him feel alive. But fear held him back. Instead, he said, "I need you to leave." Eleanor's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. "You're choosing this over your family?" "I'm choosing myself," he said, the words surprising him with their strength. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and left, the door closing with a quiet click that felt like a gunshot. Harrison sank to the floor, his breath ragged. He'd stood up to her, but the victory felt hollow. He called Theo, his voice trembling as he recounted the confrontation. Theo was there in 20 minutes, wrapping Harrison in his arms. "You did good," Theo said, his voice steady. "You stood your ground," but Harrison didn't feel strong. He felt like a kid again, hiding from his mother's judgment. Theo sensed it, pulling him to the couch. "You're not alone in this," he said. "You've got me. And there's a whole community out there who'll have your back." Theo told him about a queer support group he'd joined in college, a place where people shared their stories and found strength in each other. "Come with me tomorrow," Theo said. "Just try it." Harrison hesitated. The idea of opening up to strangers terrified him, but Theo's quiet confidence was an anchor. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll go." As they sat together, Harrison felt a flicker of hope. His mother's cross was a weight, but Theo's love was a shield. For the first time, he began to believe he could face the storm and maybe, just maybe, come out stronger. The support group met in a small community center in the East Village, its walls covered in posters for Pride events and mental health resources. Harrison's palms were sweaty as he walked in with Theo, the room buzzing with voices, some laughing, some quiet with shared pain. He felt exposed, like everyone could see the cross his mother had left on his bed. Theo squeezed his hand, grounding him. "You're safe here," he whispered. The group was diverse: men, women, non-binary folks, all ages and backgrounds, united by their journeys. A trans woman named Maria led the session, her warm smile putting Harrison at ease. "We share what we're ready to share," she said. No pressure. When it was Harrison's turn, he froze. The words caught in his throat, but Theo's steady presence gave him courage. "My mom, she found my books," he started, his voice shaky. "She thinks I'm wrong. She left a cross on my bed, like a curse." The room was silent, but not judgmental. A young man named Jamal spoke up. "My dad did something similar. Burn my pride flag. It hurts, but you learn to build your own family." Others nodded, sharing their own stories of rejection and resilience. Harrison felt a weight lift, realizing he wasn't alone. After the meeting, Maria pulled him aside. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "Your mom's fear doesn't define you." Her words stayed with Harrison as he and Theo walked back to Williamsburg. For the first time, he felt part of something bigger, a community that didn't just tolerate him, but celebrated him. But the high didn't last. When he checked his phone, there was an email from his mother. "Harrison, I've prayed for you every day since you were born. I'm not giving up on you. I've booked you a spot at the program. Please, come home." The email was a punch to the gut. She wasn't just disapproving, she was trying to erase him. Theo read it over his shoulder, his face darkening. "She's not going to stop, is she?" Harrison shook his head. "She thinks she's saving me." "Then you need to show her who you are," Theo said. "Not the son she wants, But the man you are, the idea was daunting. Harrison had spent so long hiding. The thought of confronting his mother head-on felt impossible. But the support group had shown him he didn't have to do it alone. "Will you come with me?" he asked Theo. "Always," Theo said, his voice fierce with love. They spent the evening planning. Harrison would go back to his hometown, confront his mother, and set boundaries. It wouldn't be easy. Eleanor's faith was a fortress, but he couldn't keep running. He needed to claim his life, not just for himself, but for the future he wanted with Theo. As they lay in bed that night, Theo traced circles on Harrison's back. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "We're going to be okay." Harrison wanted to believe him, but fear lingered. His mother's cross was a shadow, and the road ahead was uncertain. Yet, with Theo by his side and the echoes of the support group in his heart, he felt a spark of defiance. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the love he'd found and the life he deserved. The drive to Harrison's hometown in upstate New York was a quiet one. The hum of the car a backdrop to his racing thoughts. Theo sat in the passenger seat, his hand resting on Harrison's knee, a steady reminder of why he was doing this. The rolling hills and small-town charm of his childhood felt like a trap now. Each familiar street sign a reminder of the years he'd spent hiding. They pulled up to his mother's house, a modest colonial with a neatly trimmed lawn and a cross hanging above the front door. Harrison's stomach twisted. "You sure you're ready?" Theo asked, his voice soft but firm. "No," Harrison admitted. "But I have to do this." Eleanor was waiting in the living room, her Bible open on her lap. She stood when they entered, her eyes narrowing at Theo. "Who's this?" she asked. Her tone clipped. "This is Theo," Harrison said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "My boyfriend." The word hung in the air, a declaration and a challenge. Eleanor's face paled, her hand clutching the cross necklace at her throat. "Harrison, you don't mean that," she said, her voice trembling. "You're confused." "I'm not confused," he said, stepping closer to Theo. "I'm gay, Mom. I love him. And I'm not going to let you make me feel like that's wrong." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but there was anger there too. "This isn't you," she said. "This is the city, those books, these people." She gestured at Theo, who stood tall, unfazed. "These people," Theo said, his voice calm but sharp. "The ones who love your son for who he is, you could learn something from them." Eleanor flinched, but she didn't back down. "I raised him to know right from wrong. This isn't God's plan." Harrison felt the familiar sting of her words. But this time, he didn't shrink. "Your God isn't mine," he said. "I'm not going to that program. I'm not changing who I am to make you comfortable." The room was thick with tension. Years of unspoken truths finally laid bare. Eleanor sank onto the couch, her face a mix of grief and defiance. "You're breaking my heart," she whispered. "And you're breaking mine," Harrison said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted you to love me. All of me." Theo squeezed his hand, a silent anchor. Eleanor looked between them, her resolve wavering. "I do love you," she said, but the words fell hollow. "Then let me live," Harrison said. "Stop trying to fix me." She didn't respond, her silence a wall between them. Harrison knew this wasn't the end. Her faith ran too deep, but it was a start. He and Theo left the house, the weight of the confrontation heavy but liberating. As they drove back to the city, Theo turned to him. "You were incredible," he said. "I'm so proud of you." Harrison smiled, the first real smile in days. "I couldn't have done it without you." The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Harrison felt like he was driving towards something, not running away. His mother's cross was a scar, but it wasn't a curse anymore. It was a reminder of what he'd overcome and what he was still fighting for. Back in Brooklyn, Harrison felt different, not fixed, but freer. The cross was still in his drawer, but no longer held the same power. He and Theo spent the next few weeks rebuilding, leaning on the support group and each other. Harrison started writing again, his journal filling with new stories, not of fear, but of hope. One evening, at a queer art showcase in Manhattan, Theo unveiled a painting inspired by Harrison. It was bold and vibrant, two figures intertwined against a backdrop of city lights, their love a beacon in the chaos. Harrison stood in front of it, tears in his eyes. "This is us," Theo said, wrapping an arm around him. "This is what we're fighting for." The crowd around them buzzed with admiration. Strangers celebrating their love in a way Harrison had never thought possible. He thought of his mother, of the cross she'd left, and realized it wasn't a curse, it was a challenge. A challenge to live authentically, to love fiercely, to build a life that was his own. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Eleanor. It was short, her handwriting shaky. "I'm trying to understand. Harrison, I don't know if I can, but I'm trying. I love you." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a crack in the wall she'd built. Harrison showed it to Theo, who smiled softly. "She's not there yet," Theo said. "But you gave her something to think about." Harrison nodded, folding the letter carefully. He didn't know if his mother would ever fully embrace him, but he'd stopped needing her to. He had Theo, the support group, a community that saw him for who he was. He had his books, no longer hidden in a safe, but proudly displayed on his shelf. As winter settled over New York, Harrison and Theo walked through Central Park, snow dusting their shoulders. They stopped by their oak tree, the place where Harrison had first confessed his fears. Theo pulled him close, their breath visible in the cold air. "You're my home," Theo said, and Harrison felt the truth of it in his bones. The cross his mother left was a relic of a past he'd outgrown. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was Harrison Tate, gay, loved, and unapologetically alive. And as he kissed Theo under the falling snow, he knew that no curse could dim the light they'd built together.